Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to Korean Atlanta Mentorship. So you might be wondering why is this video called Velocity Banking Army Training? And that's because I think in my own head I'm creating an army, a YouTube army of velocity bankers, and you're here to continue your training, right? And so, what is velocity banking? All it is a debt payoff strategy where you can pay off your existing debts quickly using your line of credit as your main tool. And we assume two things when doing velocity making: A, same exact income that you had before, and B, no savings, right? So there's two steps into doing velocity banking. Number one is your budget, right? So we have a person who makes $80,000 gross, so it's about $5,000 a month. And after all expenses, oh my goodness, we only have three debts here. So credit card one, credit card two, and a student loan and rent and other stuff, right? And we only have $177 left over. So it's kind of crazy how we're actually not that much in debt. Well, I don't know for we have about how much in debt? $75,000. Well, actually, that's kind of a good amount. But yeah, so well, we're in okay debt, but just the fact that we have these two large credit cards is kind of killing our cash flow. And what we're going to do is pay off each debt so that we can easily pay, we can easily recover our cash flow to the max because right now we're at $177 of savings, which is no bueno. So one of the things I might consider when doing this is that, let's say we're a recent college graduate. Heck, maybe we might even be in our 30s. If we're living on the edge here because of our debts and rent and all the other stuff has kind of been eating up our budget, I might just do this. I might just say do this and just go ahead and swallow my pride and live with my parents, right? Because look at that. That number went from $100 to 1,300 a month, and if I'm gonna live with mom and dad, maybe I might be sacrificing something like my privacy, but it might be worth it if I could save this much money, right? So, um, let's just do this, right? So let's just assume that we're still gonna pay rent, and again, this might actually be one of the cases where I might actually consider finding ways to reduce expenses just because, like, if you pay off all your debt, you don't get that much cash flow compared to just not paying the rent or reducing your expenses. We only have three debts, right? But let's just go for it anyway and see how this works out. So the main strategy is that we're going to use our line of credit as our main tool. Now let's assume in this case we don't have what we call a personal line of credit. Again, a line of credit is a tool, financial tool where you can borrow money, pay back, and use it over and over again. And so that's essentially going to be step two, which is going to be our operating account. So when you're doing velocity banking, your line of credit is your main operating account, whereas the average American is the checking account. Okay. So now let's just do this. What we're going to do is just going to, let's get rid of this. So let's say we have, I don't know, let's just use this credit card. So let's say this is a $22,000 limit, and then we went crazy for whatever reason, and we have a $20,000 balance, right? $20,000 balance, month zero. And what happens when we use something as or a certain line of credit as our main velocity banking account? What happens with that? Well, I'll show you what happens because we're putting pretty much our entire paycheck into this. This goes to zero, right? And let me go ahead and do this. So our expenses um, is going to be sum of C8 to C, what is it? 12. Okay. So now that's going to be about 939. Well, actually, did I screw up? Yeah, I did. Okay. So about $4,139.55 of expenses. And actually, we might do this a little bit differently because, again, the disadvantage of the credit card is you can't pay anything and everything, right? Whereas the line of credit, personal home equity, you can pay anything and everything. Like, for example, I can't pay credit card one with credit card two with, yeah, I can't pay credit card one with credit card two unless I do a balance transfer, right? And so now Actually, let's do this. How much? Let's write this, and we'll say this will be the amount of credit we dump into our line of credit, our amount of income we dump into our line of credit, and then this will be our line of credit expenses, savings that we can't pay with lock, right? Line of credit. And then this will be our line of credit cash flow. Okay. So what is it that we can't pay with the line of credit? Basically, a credit card one, and then the student loan, and possibly the rent. And I know there's going to be someone out there making a comment. You can't pay rent with a credit card. And then I show them, and they're going to make another comment. You can't pay rent with a credit card. And then I'll be like in Groundhog Day. You know what I'm saying? All right, so now let's go ahead and do this, and we'll just assume we can pay rent with a credit card. Okay, so what is our line of? So let's figure out which debts that we're going to be able to put in our savings account. So it's going to be credit card one. We can't pay with credit card two, so this is going to go in here 525, right? And our student loan, right? So let's go ahead and actually do this. So that's C8 plus C10. Whoopsie. C8 plus C10, right? And is there anything else that we need to put in that savings to pay off? Nope, we're fine. Okay, so our line of credit income is essentially going to be our $5,000 income minus the savings C4, right? And so that's what we're going to put into our line of credit, and then our line of credit expenses, right, is going to be these two. I hope this is making sense. But usually, when you use credit cards as your main velocity banking account, it requires a lot of thinking, and I don't like to do a lot of thinking. But let's go ahead and sum these up. So that'll just be 3,200, right? And then now our line of credit cash flow is going to be 860. So we went 177 to 860. That's good, but that's not as good if we just didn't pay the rent. You know what I'm saying? And this would increase to, what would this be? Oh, I didn't even sum this. So it goes C11 plus C12, right? That would be great if we just didn't pay rent. So that's why I'm saying, like, you know, we have to be conscious about our budget and understand that if we don't have that much debt and our expenses in general are high, velocity banking isn't really going to help us that much. But let's just run with it, right? So we have a $22,000 line of credit, and then now let's go G2 plus H2. So to get the first month's or the subsequent balance, what you do is you take the previous month's balance interest, and then you subtract your cash flow or your line of credit cash flow, which is 860.45. And I have a feeling that this is going to take a long time to pay off, right? So and again, that's because our general expenses are very high, right? So let's go ahead and do the average of these two, multiply it by zero point 0.1, and then 10%. Actually, no, it's not 10%. I'm just getting so sloppy. It's going to be 29%, 0.29 divided by 12. Okay. And let's do 29% here. And let's just roll with it. See how long it takes off to pay off our debt. And we can see that this is kind of going to take a while. Again, it's kind of like, if your mortgage payment or whatever your general expenses are really high, this is going to take a long time to pay off. Okay, because it's not the fact that we're not the problem with this one is that our debts aren't actually eating up that much of our cash flow compared to our general expenses. That's the issue with this one. But I always like to kind of explore every facet of velocity baking so we know what the strengths and weaknesses are, right? Um, but again, if I were me, I would just like, nope, I'm not paying rent, living at home, no thank you, right? All right, so now, all right, so this is gonna, if we're gonna do it this way, we're gonna pay off that credit card in about 34 months, right? So certainly faster than if we just do it the way that the bank tells us to. So 34 months, and this is gonna be 20K, right? And that's under a little bit under 3 years. Now we're gonna switch it up, right? So now what we're going to do is figure out what the balance is after 34 months. And let's go ahead and just use a minimum payment calculator of a credit card, bankrate.com. All right, so now 15,000, right? This is our credit card original balance at 30%. And let's go ahead and calculate that. And let's figure out at 34 months what the balance is. So we paid off 5 grand. Okay. Now let's do this after 34 months. So what we would do is we would just move this to here, right? Essentially just switching credit cards at this point in time, right? So now we're going to do that, okay? And then what's going to happen, so this is going to be 30% now. So now what's going to happen is that we're going to modify our calculations a little bit. So we could just say at this point it's going to be zero point 0.3, although it's not going to really make that much of a difference. But the thing that really matters is that now our cash flow has changed. And here's the other thing too. Some part of this is unrealistic because with credit cards, based on how they calculate, usually the payment will go down based on the balance. So it's not always going to be 525, right? That's totally not realistic. But just to kind of get the understand concept, we'll just do it that way. So now guess what? This is our main line of credit. Bam, zero, right? And so now the only thing that we got to pay with our savings that we can't pay with our line of credit is a student loan. Okay. And so now what's our income? We dump our $4,500, take out $32,000, 3,200 expenses, and then this cash flow will be used to pay off the next credit card, right? So when you're doing credit cards, again, always easier to deal with the home equity or personal line of credit. But if for whatever reason you can't get it, right, then just use credit cards. But I don't, credit cards are just meant to be used, in my opinion, if you're doing velocity banking, one card at a time. Okay, so now let's go ahead and do this. And now you see that the debt payoff, the first one is the big hurdle. And so now 43 months 43 months is the payoff for this first credit card, right? So 43 months. Okay, 43 months, and that'll be 35K in debt. Now we got to tackle student loan, right? So now let's, at this stage, we're going to figure out, okay, well, are we going to, what are we going to do? Because this one's a 4.5% interest rate. And then this is a 30% interest rate. So are we going to do velocity banking? Yes, you can still do velocity banking, but anytime you have a big loan amount with a low interest rate and it doesn't significantly take up that much cash flow, you could do something called chunking, or you could just overpay it with your savings, right? So let me just kind of do this where I'll just redo this. So we paid off to 2 credit cards, so we don't, but the only thing that we can't pay with the credit cards is that student loan in which you use Plastique. And so let me just do this here. So this is going to be, um, all right, so savings, we'll just assume is 0. And then at this point, right, so C2 minus C3, one of the things we can do is because these credit cards are paid off, we just apply for a personal line of credit and we probably get it, right? Or you could use Plastic and learn how to game the system and get some points along with that. But let's just assume we did use your 30% credit card to pay off a student loan, right? So let's just go ahead and write this down, 40,000, which is kind of a semi a lot, especially if you're not making more than 6 figures, right? What's our current balance right now? 40,000 at 43 months. So let me just do calculator amortization. All right. So 40,000, and then the student loan is about 10 years and we'll say 4.5% interest rate. Okay. And at where are we? I think it said uh month 43. So month 43. And then 27 grand. Okay. 27 grand. So we paid a significant amount of our student loan. All right. So let's just check this out. I don't know if you ever heard of the cash flow index, but basically it's a formula where you take the statement balance, right? And then you divide it by the payment. So 414,414.55. And so if you have a loan under than 50, it gives you an arbitrary number, but you have a loan under 50, that means to pay it off quickly. But it's 66. So again, if you don't know what I'm talking about, just look up cash flow index on the internet. But let's just go ahead and do this. So we're gonna put what the current balance is right now and 4.5% interest rate and what is our current payment. So this is our very last debt, 414.55. And again, we don't have to put the whole thing. I say when you're dealing with low interest, lower interest rate loans, right? And a higher interest rate line of credit. And again, at this point, you don't have to do velocity banking. But let's just assume that we're just doing an amount equal to our salary, transferring it into little chunks. So 5000 is a chunk amount. We'll say 30% interest. And then our monthly income is about 5000. And then we do everything except for that for the last debt, whatever this debt payoff is. So it'll be 3200. And again, if this person didn't have any debt, isn't that insane that the only thing to be left over is 1800, which is not that much to go off of, right? But as you can see here, even if we use a 30% credit card, we pay it off in 1.5 years. So by the way, let me mention what this is. This is a velocity banking calculator provided by Renata. So if you're a Renata student, you're able to get it, and I'm a Renata student. And I actually am an independent contractor marketer, meaning I sell their products and I get a commission. So here, 1.5 years, but if you had a personal line of credit, right? That would essentially be halved, or home equity line of credit if I do 15, right? Now, again, is can you do with the 30% credit card? Yes, but you might have the accelerated interest, but you could still do velocity banking. Or if you're really that disciplined, just dump your entire savings or cash flow into that loan, right? So your all your additional savings, and then this will go to zero, and now we're saving 1800 a month. So again, 1800 a month, to be honest, is really not that much. And so at this point, I would just say like put this as a zero, right? And just live with my parents so I could get this extra 3000 a month. But let me go back here. So let's just pretend we still pay rent, and I'm really obsessed with turning this into zero, just because, and probably lowering this too. I mean, if I live with my parents, am I going to pay $2000 a month in general expenses? I have no clue. But let's just do here 1.5 years. So yeah, so 1.5 years. So 1.5 plus 34. Let's go ahead and calculate that. So 1.5 times 12 plus 34. So 52 is the number of months it takes to pay off everything. And so we'll say 4.3 years. Uh, let's see, 55 plus 40, that's 95. So 95K of debt free, right? So woohoo. So what does this teach you? That student loans are a giant ripoff, right? Because, you know, there are people out there who get these huge loans, 100, $200,000, and if you make $80,000, and you could see that this loan is not that big, right? But if you had an $80,000 loan as a student loan, along with these two credit cards, um, that certainly would not take 4.3 years. And as I said before, sometimes desperate times call for desperate measures, and so you may want to find ways to reduce your expenses by living with your parents. That's what I see. And here's the crazy thing. Doesn't that mean that $80,000 isn't really that much, right? So we live in a time where, people who are making six figures are just broke just because they don't know how to manage their debt, but at the same time, their expenses they have to know how to manage as well, right? But this is a video where it's like, it was okay, but I feel like because I've been doing like really dramatic increases in cash flow. And again, we only have three debts, so it's not that dramatic. Um, this one's the one that hasn't impressed me much. Kind of like that Shania Twain song. That don't impress me, but it's okay. Since we're in our training facility, we got to know the good and the bad. And in this situation, we did okay, but because our general expenses are so high, velocity banking wasn't as impressive. Because our debts are lower compared to the general expenses. All right, well, hopefully that makes sense. And I'm quite sleepy right now. So before I go to sleep, and I'm like the worst drill sergeant ever because apparently drill sergeants aren't supposed to sleep. But before I go to sleep, if you're interested in joining our group and learning about financial literacy and real estate investing, go ahead and click the Google form link below. Other than that, have a great day, and we'll speak on the next video.